During the winter of 1986, a series of unexplained sightings of a mysterious figure stalking the residences of hospice patients throughout Meridian County was reported to the local authorities. This unknown character was said to be dressed in semi-formal attire, sporting a black fedora-style hat and wearing a macabre white-colored mask representing a shallow skull. Appearing seemingly out of nowhere, this individual was noted by a number of citizens throughout the area. This person would stand at a distance from select homes and appeared to be taking notes and making observations of the residences. Concerns were raised and questions were asked about who this figure was and why this person would contribute to the agony already being suffered by the various occupants as they lived out their last remaining days at home awaiting death. After several months and a number of sightings of this individual, multiple complaints by family members reached media outlets and news agencies. Police reports began to mount regarding the stranger walking among blocks of residences and standing outside the homes of those awaiting hospice care. Holding a ledger-like book and a quill pen, this stranger appeared to be welcoming those in the last days or hours of their lives. Local investigative journalists became involved. Through their own efforts and documented police reports, this unknown individual was identified as Dr. Gregory Allen Jacobs. Dr. Jacobs was employed at the medical examiner's office in Meridian County. He held the position of assistant medical examiner until being discharged for unethical conduct. Dr. Jacobs was regarded as a highly skilled scientist that kept to himself. Co-workers found him to be a bit odd and off-putting, but otherwise competent. He held this position for a number of years before being let go due to his own medical concerns and reoccurring issues regarding questionable conduct. This included the illegal use of corpses for his own warped scientific experiments, as well as the improper care of human remains. Dr. Jacobs was a genius when it came to mortuary science. If there were any drawbacks to his techniques, it was that he preferred the manual, hands-on approach as opposed to the more modern mechanical and technological methods. He treated each cadaver as if it were his own personal loved one. He was a master at restoration, especially concerning victims of violence or damaging automobile accidents. He accepted cases that most other morticians would regulate to a closed casket status. Many a family member would express their absolute gratitude for Dr. Jacobs' ability to provide an open casket viewing in cases of extreme disfiguration. After Dr. Jacobs' release from the medical examiner's office and subsequent dismissal from his job as a mortician, Dr. Jacobs descended into his own fantasy world. Dr. Jacobs' personal ledger was filled with the names of those that were recently subscribed to hospice care. Dr. Jacobs, using his knowledge of area medical centers, was able to acquire the names, addresses, and other personal information of individuals within Meridian County that were seeking end-of-life care. Overcome with his desires to greet death and to fulfill some type of perverse passion to guide those who were at the end of their own lives, he would plot out a ritual-like schedule to go near various residences where those awaiting death would calmly wait for the end to arrive. He would present himself as a guide and perform services to assist in the transition from life to death, making notes in his ledger while imagining the patients taking their last gasps while within his presence. He was described as a mentally sick person who dressed in a bizarre manner, harassing both those near death and their families. Dr. Jacobs' activities continued for several months. Since no formal complaints were received, the local police department did not intervene. News of this activity was reported on local news channels. Several investigative journalists from the local press decided to pay Dr. Jacobs a visit to follow up on earlier reports of his conduct. After several unsuccessful attempts to contact Dr. Jacobs, a welfare check of his residence was made by the local authorities. It was discovered that Dr. Gregory Allen Jacobs had taken his own life. Dr. Jacobs was found sprawled out on the basement floor. He was dressed in his usual attire, complete with mask and holding his personal ledger. Upon examining his ledger, it was found that one of the last acts to be performed by Dr. Jacobs was to inscribe his own name in his personal journal, signifying his own journey into the afterlife. It was later found that Dr. Jacobs suffered from a terminal medical condition and apparently ended his own life. welcoming death in the same manner as he attempted to provide to those whom he formerly visited. The case investigation drew so much scrutiny from local residents and the media, as well as loved ones of those who Dr. Jacobs had visited. During this time period of media attention, the case drew the notice of Professor Xavier Grant and Dr. Laura Linaria, as they pondered the question of, why does evil exist? This case drew their interest. Through their subsequent investigation into this bizarre individual, it was determined that, in this case, evil presented itself in many different forms. Although Dr. Jacobs had sustained some type of mental breakdown due to the discovery of his own terminal state, he also acted upon impulse and a perverse fascination with death, as displayed in his practices while both employed as a medical examiner and a mortician. It was also surmised that Dr. Jacobs used this abnormal fascination with death as a means to control those around him. This case history would later be referenced in the research manuals of Professor Grant and Dr. Linaria in their quest to answer the question, why does evil exist?
During the late season of 1986, a former medical practitioner and mortician became the focus of attention, being found to have gone presumably insane. He was discovered to have illegally gained medical information on those closest to death via hospice care. After extensive investigation and inquiry, the prophet of death, as he was first referred to, was traced to multiple incursions into the private lives of patients and close loved ones, with family members closest to death. When answering the question of why does evil exist, the question posed is, why does a man that once assisted the living glide towards death, then turn those facing death against it? While we may never understand the actions of this former medical practitioner and mortician, his cause for evil can only be explained as a form of mental illness and a truly macabre desire for the afterlife. Known in life as Gregory Jacobs, in death he is now known as the Proclaimer.
This is Wild Future Productions.